All right, I've got 7 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get this public hearing started. Just so everyone knows, I've got you guys back there are okay, you're not on camera. If we move up here, you'll be on camera. We are live streaming this as well. And the meeting is, of course, being recorded. So like I said, I got 7 o'clock, so we'll get this public hearing started. If this is your first time attending one of the public hearings, this is opportunity for council, since this is a council public hearing, to receive your input on the proposed ordinance. It's a zoning ordinance, so by law, zoning ordinances go through Planning and Zoning Commission first. They have a public hearing on them. If that committee sends it to council, then council considers it as an ordinance, and council also has to have a public hearing on it before they can vote on it to determine if it passes. So that's what we're here for tonight, is the public hearing. When I get done talking, anybody that wants to speak can come on up and speak. We tend to follow the council rules, which is 5 minutes per speaker. Just come up, identify yourself, name and address, so that we have a record of who is speaking, since it is a public hearing. As I mentioned, it is a council one. I know council members Keller, Reedy, and Schaffner are in the building. Council member McCreary is watching online, was not able to be here. So what I also typically do is, before we open it up, is I give a little bit of the legislative history of how we got here before each of these. This one I had to write down because it's a little longer. So this is Ordinance 2021-25, which is a zoning change with regards to short-term rentals. It actually started back in 2019 when we had some short-term rentals pop up in the village, and we didn't really they didn't fit in definitions in our existing zoning code, and we weren't sure how to fit them in there in different locations. In 2020, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that commission is comprised of 3 residents, 1 council member, and myself. We started to learn more about Airbnbs in particular, but this ordinance extends to all short-term rentals. So we took a systematic process to it. We invited in owner-operators of short-term rentals to explain to us how they work. If memory serves me, we had 2 Airbnb operators and owners come and talk to us. We did not have anybody else. We do have a couple of short-term rentals in the village that are offered daily, weekly, or monthly that don't advertise on Airbnb or VRBO, they're word of mouth. Those owners, operators did not come and talk to us about their business practices. We invited in neighbors to hear from them. The planning and zoning group had a discussion as to whether a zoning code change was even needed. And then obviously they decided yes, or else we wouldn't be here. And then began researching what other communities were doing and discussing what the code should look like. It started in 2020, but we did have about 4 or 5 months because of the pandemic where we didn't meet. So we picked up in late 2020 with those discussions. On July 8th of 2021, the Planning and Zoning Committee held its public hearing here and received comments and questions from the public. That group then met again in August, had further discussion and research, and then at the September meeting, finalized the ordinance that we have. and voted 5-0 to send it to council. It's been in council since September of 2021. It has gone through 2 readings, so it is up for a 3rd reading. However, it's been tabled for several months to allow for this public hearing to get scheduled. Holidays, changes to council, other issues popped up, so we are here. So that's kind of legislative history. Again, this would apply to short-term rentals that offer rooms or entire structures for rent on a short-term basis, not just those that do it online. As I mentioned, this is an opportunity to get your feedback. Council can answer questions if they want, but in general, it's to receive your feedback. I will make one note. I have received a couple of questions recently because, as some people know, there is a House bill out there that deals with short-term rentals, and so the question I received was, why are we still pursuing this when that bill is out there that restricts that? And that bill only prohibiting short-term rentals. So if our ordinance said there were no short-term rentals in the village, we would be in violation if that bill became law. And it also prohibits limiting the number of permits you issue. It doesn't prohibit the regulations that this ordinance has. So if that bill passes, I don't think it will affect our ordinance. So with that, I'm going to sit up here and keep an eye on the live stream to make sure it doesn't go down and take some notes. With that, like I said, I'll turn it over. Just come up, introduce yourself, name and address, and we'll hear your comments. Thank you.
Brad, could you possibly tell them what the ordinance says? What is in the ordinance?
Do you want me to read the ordinance?
Maybe some of the people need to know, hey, what's this all about?
All right, so let me grab mine. So as I mentioned, this is a zoning code change. So the ordinance amends chapter 1274. In particular, it's removing the definition of bed and breakfast and replacing it with short-term rental definitions. The committee has a definition for an owner-occupied short-term rental, which would be someone renting out a mother-in-law suite or a room in their house, and a what they call a commercial short-term rental, which would be an entire unit or structure available. Changing bed and breakfast to short-term rental throughout, it makes short-term rentals a conditional use in all zoning districts except industrial and light manufacturing and the general business, which we, so it's a conditional use in our residential areas, our mixed residential areas, our Market Street area. It calls for requiring a permit to operate a short-term rental, and then it outlines what's in the application: name, phone numbers, addresses, requires insurance coverage, background checks, fire safety plans, very similar to what we would have in a commercial business that is opening up within the village. There is a fee to process that. Council, if this passes, would set that fee. Most of our fees for this stuff range in the $150 to $300, so it's not an extraordinary fee. Requires sufficient parking to comply with our code, and then requires the issuance of the permit. The Board of Zoning Appeals, depending on the location, could talk about other conditions. And then once it's in use, there's, if the ownership changes, then we have to be notified. It makes it clear in here that if it is what we call a commercial short-term rental, which again is just a whole house being available for a short-term rent, that we are not intending to change the classification of that property from residential to commercial, that definition is only for the short-term rental ordinance. We don't want to have a house and then all of a sudden it become a commercial property. So we specify that out. And then there is a penalty provision for anybody operating that doesn't follow the code. And then there is a time to comply provision, which would mean anybody that's currently operating a short-term rental, as it's written right now, would have 6 months to get the application in basically and get their permit. It wouldn't require, next week for someone to come in. And then again, it amends there's a second table in our zoning code that is a table of permitted and conditional uses, and it updates bed and breakfast to short-term rental. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So, all right, now I will sit down, we'll take some notes, and whoever wants to come on up first, like I said, just name and address, and we're ready.
Hi, I'm Kelly Savage. My address is 739 South Main Street. I'm going to try and be quiet. I'm a very loud person and microphones are not usually my friend. So I'll try my best.
If you speak up though, it'll help online, so
That's
we're
fine.
good.
Okay, if I get too loud, just let me know, because I try not to. I am going to just give a little bit of background. I am actually kind of a representative for events at 501 or 501 West Market Street. My husband actually works for the Foremans at Baltimore Builder Supply, and so he was one of the local contractors that they hired to help restore 501 West Market. During that restoration process, the Foremans only used local contractors. So they try to keep everything local. That's kind of like their thing. They try to support our community. And my husband has roofing experience, but not Spanish style roofing experience. And so the quote they got from an actual roofing company was like $80,000 to $100,000 to actually just repair the roof. But then that was on top of the asbestos removal they had to pay for, and the drywall and plaster repair, and the electrical and all that stuff. So that was like a big chunk of change. Well, they hired one of the roofers to actually come out, and he spent like 3 or 4 hours with my husband teaching him how to repair Spanish style roofs. So there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. My husband figured it out, and Pete repeated it because he messed up a few times and broke a few tiles along the way, but he made it work. So that home is actually quite personal to us because he did put so much time into it. And the Foremans have always been very supportive of us. And one of the main reasons they purchased that is because they didn't want it to be condemned. They didn't want it to be flipped by a house flipper, because let me tell you this right now, if you don't know house flippers, they'll come in and they would not have replaced or spent $80,000 to $100,000 to maintain the historical integrity of that building. They would have ripped all that tile off, fixed the roof leaks that were damaging the house inside, and they would have just put regular shingles up. And then that house would not be the same. So that's a little bit of background on 501, which is one of the short-term rentals that are being discussed today. I also wanted to point out that when we started events at 501, it wasn't an Airbnb, it was like a small event center, which, I know some people were worried about because the Griley house is, was kind of like the local event center. But we weren't trying to ever take business away, but we were trying to provide opportunities. Actually, the Foreman's daughter, Brooke, one of her best friends, hosted a baby shower for her stepdaughter and did use events at 501, and we kind of gave her a silly hard time about that. But it came down to price. We were priced higher than what she could afford, so she went with the Griley house. Okay, that's opportunity. That's your choice. So we welcome that. But Cyrus Moore, who is actually the manager of the museum and the Griley house, he accidentally overbooked or double booked an event one day, called me up and said, hey, can we, can you lower your fee that you charge and allow us to put one of our events at 501 and then you'll get what we would have made? I said, that's not my decision. Let me call Rick Foreman real quick and we'll see what he says. It was a 30-second phone call because I explained the situation to Rick and it was a definite yes. And they got to have both events, one at the Griley House and then one at events at 501. So the Foremans are very much about this community. And that's where I'm kind of bothered by this ordinance in a sense because, and I know I kind of missed where maybe you said like the location was for this ordinance, because you're saying all short-term rentals, but like this building that we're in has been used as like a short-term rental. The Griley House has been used as a short-term rental for events. I actually paid $60, I think, for yoga classes that are going to start here in May. That's a collaboration between the Baltimore Downtown Restoration Committee and Rachel Landis, which I'm super excited about because I love having local workout classes and stuff. But I'm trying to support local and, we're talking about parking and things. And if you look out here, we all have to park on the street. So one of the things that you put in your ordinance is that you have to have sufficient parking. Well, the village's own buildings don't have sufficient parking. When I had my bridal shower at the Griley House back in 2006, my family had to park on the street because there wasn't enough on-site or off-street parking. So the two community-based short-term rentals, in my opinion here, aren't going to be following the exact same rules that we're implementing for these other short-term rentals. Let me see. And then the other thing that I'm a little bit, worried about, one of our short-term rentals, which is not events at 501, one of the stipulations in the ordinance says that they have to reside in Fairfield County or like a contingent county or like a neighboring county, I'm assuming. One of our rentals or our short-term rentals do not meet that bill. They bought the property and they actually live in California. They're from here. Well, the daughter is, Savannah Hamilton's from here, but she bought the property. She's using it as an Airbnb, but she lives in California. Now her parents and her family are helping her support it while she's away, but that kind of restricts her opportunity to be an entrepreneur and actually grow this community. And my big thing is kind of putting these restrictions on is gonna like prevent people from wanting to do things like this. We have 2 coffee shops opening up in this community too. We can barely sustain 1, and now we have 2, and I wish them the best of luck. But if we don't increase our traffic, the pass through here, if we shut down those opportunities, these businesses are not gonna thrive. They're just not. The Pine House and RB3s, they stay open because they offer alcohol, right? That's just like, alcohol is an easy one, okay? But we have coffee shops and they're great, but they're not going to be able to sustain themselves if we don't increase the foot traffic in this building or in this community. And speaking of events at 501, they can literally walk down to Schaffner's, one of our local staples in this community, and have lunch. They can walk down, well, right over here actually, to one of the coffee shops, and really the other coffee shops right over there, or grab a bite at the Pine House. Everything is within walking distance for most of these Airbnbs, and I'm not really sure why we're trying to prevent people from providing that opportunity and providing that exposure to our community.
I've got 5 minutes.
I'm done.
Well, if you could, you can wrap up. I'm not
Okay.
I'm not going to pull a hook out.
Sure.
But,
Okay. Well, I just have like one more thing.
yeah. No problem.
It's about background checks. And, and I understand that you're looking at other areas to figure out what they're doing to kind of be on the same page. The problem that I have, and I have it with, kind of everything in life, my work life, everything, I want everything to be as fair as possible. So it seems like we're kind of targeting these short-term rentals and we're not expecting the same things of long-term rentals or even the private residences in this community. So that's a little bothersome to me. And as a teacher in this school district, I would rather you background check the tenants that are moving into these long-term rentals versus the owners of these properties, because I guarantee that's going to help clear up a lot of issues that are going on in our community that are way more important than short-term rentals. So I think it's just silly that we're requiring a background check of a homeowner to do something like that when we're allowing tenants to come in and out not in and out of our community, but also in and out of our school district and messing kind of things up sometimes, because we just let certain like long-term rentals or whatever kind of like be willy-nilly with things, and it's not consistent across the board. So if it was something we were expanding to the whole community, I might be on board with it, but I feel like we're just targeting this subset of people. So thank you so much.
Anyone else?
Hello, my name's Sean Shook. I live at 1025 Bickle Church Road. Been a resident here forever. I truly believe that this stems, a lot of this, people don't like it when you, do better than other people, people get jealous. I truly believe when people were attacking or trying to put, basically the government overreaching what they should be doing. I guarantee you, if you pull all the people in this town, you're gonna find brothers and uncles, and people that own houses, and they're renting, and you ain't gonna know about it. They're renting a room out because they're not advertised. They're renting, just to keep their head above water. You might have a husband and wife that get a divorce, and the guy's at home, and now he brings two people to rent from them to keep his head above water, so they don't lose their house. Where does it stop? Where does it stop? When you talk short term, whose definition is short term? I just bought a rental here in town, a 3-unit in a house. And is my month to month short term? Because I'm telling you, I spent thousands and thousands of dollars to try to make it better. New windows, new all those things. So when do you beat on my door and say, hey, you're gonna have to go through all these stipulations or because you're month to month? Or when do we attack a yearly? It doesn't stop. At some point in time, these people that are doing these rentals or whatever, and you know what? I hope one of these days that I have the same thing, But we can't. It's like overtaxed, governed. I just don't believe that it's fair. Period. I don't know why we want to do that. I was on city council many years ago, and I know how it all works. And it's not a great. It's no matter what you do, you're not going to be like I get it. It's a thankless job. It's a thankless job, but I don't believe what this ordinance is doing is right. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
My name's Rick Ellis. I live at 1890 West Market Street. I grew up here, moved back about 18 years ago. And when I was a kid, that house at 501 was a jewel. It was beautiful. And 18 years ago, when I moved back, I can't believe they hadn't tore it down because it just was dilapidated. The people that own that, Rick and Robin, have to be the third or fourth leading employer or biggest employer in this town. I just feel like what Sean said, we're trying to overgovern, we're trying to overstep, and it's ridiculous that we live in a town that the people that want to do good and have businesses got to fight to do it or fight or pay more. I've rented that place a couple times, and it's probably it's got to be one of the nicest places in Fairfield County to rent for a bit. And they're more than accommodating. And besides that, the people that they do everything for this town, just like Ed Schaffner and some of the other people. And the lady that's got the realtor place next door. There's lots of good businesses in this town, but I just feel like passing this type of ordinance, it's just going to run businesses off. Hell, half the businesses in here empty now. And it shouldn't be that hard, or they shouldn't have to fight that hard to have a small business. So I implore you to don't overgovern, to really think about this and do the right thing, and don't pass this.
Good evening. My name is James Chapin, 513 West Washington Street. I have no skin in this game whatsoever. I'm a resident. I'm not here supporting 501 or any other short-term rental. We can't have 5 in this whole town. There can't be more than 5 short-term rentals in this town. Or places that, well, like 501 is not going to be a short-term rental. According to what you've got written in this ordinance here, it's going to be a commercial use property. So I'm just looking at, what did I read? What sticks out to me is we have a hard time getting simple things done in this village sometimes, small stuff, right? And if you haven't heard my name, if you work for the council, you should, because I spent a year and a half getting a simple building permit to put a room addition on my house. I have the smallest section of lots in town, 5,200 square feet. And at $40 a sheet for OSB, it's a lot easier for me to renovate my home post building home. So this is the second thing to come to council to get passed, where we're restricting rights of homeowners. I was the reason the last one went through and it passed saying, now we have to have lot use rate. You can only use so much of your lot, or green space they call it. So that's all because of me, because I wanted to improve my property. Now I see, I'm like, man, they're doing it to somebody else. You've got to be kidding me. It is not, it should not be the council's position, the town's position to limit opportunities. So it's my money that pays for my property. You have your standards to say, cut your grass, maintain your paint, maintain your whatever, keep your property looking nice. Those are good things that we should have. We should have building code standards for a new building, for building code standards when you're getting a remodel job done. Those are all about safety. There's nothing about this that's about safety. And the only part that could possibly be about safety is there's a whole section here about fire code, having an egress, right? So if you're a short-term rental, you've got to have an escape plan, you've got to have a fire plan and egress. Well, that is being administered from your code by the village administrator. Well, someone took a year and a half to get me a simple building plan approved. How much confidence can we have that that person is going to be able to execute fire code standards to ensure that it's actually a safe egress plan? So for 5 properties in this town that are going to be that way, we're going to spend more money because whoever the administrator is, now or down the road, is going to have some sort of fire training so that when they walk in a house, they're all like, oh yeah, that looks like a good window to get out of. Egress is about more than, is that window good enough to get out of? So we're going to spend money to train people on that. And then if it's an older home, then they're going to have to understand something about the building code, because I see nothing in here about ensuring that fire detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, those are all within a house. There are certain locations where all these things need to be. So how do we know whoever's going there to do the inspection knows that those are all going to be in the right position? So I just don't have confidence in the way that this bill is written. And if you've had it on the table since 2019, I'm honestly, that's a farce, quite honestly. How many times has anyone in here, or would anyone in here agree to a tax, sign yes, I'm going to take this tax and I agree to pay it, without knowing what that tax is going to be? Their mayor, is that who you are?
Mm-hmm.
$150 to $300 is what something like this usually runs. You've had it since 2019 and we don't even have it in here what the fee is going to be. Now that to me seems like, oh, good golly, that's got to be the easiest part of it to get together. How much are we going to charge somebody to do this? Well, I don't know. 150 to 300. Well, once we find out what it's going to cost to take our administrator or street park superintendent or whoever's going to go do these inspections, and we have to find out, gosh, they're going to need certification and all of these things to be able to do this. Well, that fee may go from 150 to 500 or 1,000, because that's how they're going to pay for the training for whoever's getting this done. So it's poorly written. I think it is limiting small business. It's limiting people who are coming here. I lived in Baltimore my whole life. When I left to go, I deployed out to Iraq in 2009, and I moved my wife and kids here. And I said, we're going to be here for just a little bit. I don't want to come back to Baltimore and be one of those people who comes back and lives forever. I'm getting out of this town. I came home from the war and my wife was like, God, I love this town. She's like, we shouldn't leave. The kids love the school. So we love this place. I'm here for life now, right? And so we ought to continue to make it an inclusive place where people feel at home. It's got a Hallmark Town feel to it all the time. And that's what we want to bring in here and keep here. And we want to make sure that when we want other people to experience Baltimore, they're going to do it through an Airbnb. Because if they don't do it through an Airbnb, then they're going to stay at a hotel in Pickerington or Lancaster, and they're never going to come to our community and see why we all live here and why some of us have stayed here. So I would just ask the council, look at this, really think, do we need this for 5 properties that are going to actually not benefit, they're going to suffer? And then I could probably tell you right now, I mean, I don't know personally, but I would say that 501 would probably never get rented again after this, because I don't think Rick would ever, he would just walk away and say, you know what, I'm done. And now we're taking that asset away from our community. It's a beautiful home, it's got historic value, and we're taking that away by passing something like this. And I guess that's how I feel. I think you should just really rethink this. Let's keep our community. We're not, now, if we have 50 homes, 60 homes in town, now we should readdress this and figure out what we got to do if we have 50 or 60. But we're talking 5. We're going to spend more money to put this all together and enforce it, and we're ever going to create from it. And we're not going to create any safety from it either, not from what I've written here. What I've read from what you wrote is, it's not poorly written. It's just something that was probably written from someone who they didn't understand the impact. And I could almost guarantee you this idea didn't even come from a resident of Baltimore. If I had to look at this idea came from someone who is from out of town, someone who works here in the village and thinks we ought to be more like Rainville, we ought to be more like Canal, or and we're not any of those places. We're Baltimore, and we should keep it that way.
Anyway, all right.
Hello there. I'm Michelle Stitzline, and I live at 1780 Basel Western Road, the former Grange Hall. The artist in town that created the crazy scarecrow at corner 256 and Basel Western. I'm all about mom and pop, and I think that was one of the reasons I came to Baltimore. I like things that aren't chains, and when my husband and I travel, we go to Airbnbs because we also want to see local things and appreciate a community that's small and support those people that make a community original. I'm also all about things that are original. And I think the more difficult you make any kind of business that's local have to jump through hoops, it's going to be more difficult to run a business, to have them mom and pop. And if they close their doors and shutter their doors, that leaves an opportunity for the big guys to roll in. The big guys, the chains, the things that don't make a community what they originally were. And if you shut down the Airbnbs and the opportunities that they had, you're looking at what? Holiday Inn, Marriott, Red Roof. We've seen that happen with restaurants. We've seen it happen with other things already in the community. And Pickerington's just down the road. They're creeping this way. So don't make it easier for the big guys to roll in. Keep it small, keep it Baltimore. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kevin Catchmore, and I live at 107 Creekview Drive. Standing right here. Just a couple of thoughts on this. I'm kind of new to this whole discussion. I recently moved here about 3 or 4 years ago, opened a business here. First, I want to say that the village has been fantastic to us. We put an addition on. We did open a business, and they've been very, very supportive to us. Listening to what we're talking about here tonight, I did have some questions and some, not that I'm looking for an answer right now, but for council to consider. However many short-term rentals we have there been problems there? I mean, has this been a source of rowdy behavior or crime or anything like that? I don't think so. But the question remains. So I would ask the Baltimore Police Department, what kind of calls do we have to these locations? If there's none, I don't see that as an issue. How are these short-term rentals impacting our village? Positively, negatively? I mean, short-term rentals eat, they buy gasoline, they buy products, they spend time with shopping and doing other things, bringing people into the community. I think that's a good thing. And I have to, my wife and I also, last person that just spoke, talked about how her and her husband use Airbnbs. When we travel, we love to use Airbnbs because you get a real flavor for the neighborhood, the people, the location. The good parts, the bad parts, but it's you get a cultural exposure that you don't if you're staying at a 200-room hotel. So I think if someone else said, you know, we have 50 of these places, maybe it's worth considering something. But based on 5 or 10 or even 15, I suspect there's more out there than we know about. That tells me that they're not a problem if we don't know about it. So I'm just not real sure what the drive behind putting additional ordinances on small businesses will be at this point. But that's the question I have. Is it sound thinking to do so? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nathaniel Stitzline, 1780 Basel Western Road. I don't have much to add to what everybody else has so eloquently said, but I will say I want to thank Rick and Robin for the wonderful restoration they made on 501 West Market Street. And we've had friends and family stay there, and they really enjoyed their experiences. I saw all the work that they put into that house, and it is the gem of our community as far as I'm concerned. It's a beautiful house, beautiful setting. And I think the other short-term rental that I know about, we've had friends and family stay there as well. As far as I know, I've not heard about any problems with those 2 houses. I don't know where the other rental units are, but also I think those 2 houses that I'm aware of are probably better maintained than most of the other houses in town. So I don't know if that's a concern, but also I think with Airbnb, Vrbo, those types of places, if people are renting them out, there are usually indications if there are smoke alarms in the house, carbon monoxide alarms, if there are other safety issues to be aware of. And on those reviews, they kind of weed people out if they're not really well maintained, or if there are safety issues, if the owners of the properties aren't maintaining them or aren't very good at communicating, aren't taking their safety and I guess their safety issues and procedures are in place that renters will comment on that and negatively affect their business enterprises. I do think I understand why the village wants to have some guidelines in place, because I know if you heard the news, the recent Airbnb shooting in Pittsburgh due to a party of 200 people crammed into one house. So I think if there were 200 people in one of these houses in Baltimore, there would be enough of disruption that the police would probably be called to that setting. But I'm not sure if all of these guidelines that are being proposed right now are necessarily going to preclude that from happening. But I do want to say that I think some more consideration should be put into these proposals. So, thank you.
I'm sorry, I just remembered one point that I forgot to mention. The requirement for a background check on the property owner. I don't even know if that would be legal to require, because you don't ask for a background check on any other property or business owner, except for maybe a bar. But I don't think that's a requirement, which I don't think that any of these owners would have a problem passing it, but I don't know why we would spend the money to do that or have them spend the money to do it.
Anyone else? Choose about this time that someone else pops up.
Anyone that hasn't said anything want to come up? Going once, going twice. All right. So appreciate everybody coming out. Like I said, members of council are here, one's online. Our next council meeting is this upcoming Monday, which is the 24th, I believe. Starts at 7:30. This ordinance is tabled. Council has a number of options that they can do. They can leave it tabled and discuss it. They can remove it from the table, which would bring it up for consideration and a vote. Those are pretty much the two options they can do. We do have, if people are coming in, we do have limited seating in the council chambers, but our council meetings are streamed on YouTube as well. So you can watch on YouTube live. There's about a minute lag in real time. But you can see what's happening, and if you can't watch it that night, because it's streamed on YouTube, it saves it so you can go back and watch it at your leisure. Again, I'll do one more last call just in case. If not, I will say again, thank you everyone for coming out, and we will close this public hearing meeting at 7:44. Thank you all for coming out.